Hi, my name is Natalie, and today I'm going to be talking about Christian imagery in Pandora Hearts by Jun Makazuki. I noticed that the last Pandora Hearts video I made, the non-spoiler review where I tried and probably failed to explain Pandora Hearts, has rocketed in views, which means that it is one of my most viewed videos on this channel, and I feel like I would be amiss if I didn't talk about it more. So I'm so happy that you guys love Pandora Hearts, so I'm making another video for you guys. So this is for you all who watched that video. Thank you so much. As I was reading Pandora Hearts, I noticed that there were a lot of instances of Christian imagery that popped up, from the very beginning with the cross on the grave to even things that were said when I was watching the anime of Pandora Hearts that I noticed. It all sounded very interesting to me, and so I did some deep dive work and I found a lot of instances. I'm sure there's probably more than what I'm going to say in this video, but I really just wanted to make this video as kind of a fun one because I just feel like it's kind of important to talk about some of the other things that are in works. You know, every piece also has a bit of something in it. A lot of works have, you know, old Greek and Roman mythology in them, and it just so happens that Pandora Hearts seems to have a lot of Christian imagery, and I wanted to talk about that today. So, here you go. Also, quick warning. Unlike my non-spoiler review of Pandora Hearts, this will be spoiler-packed. And if you've never read Pandora Hearts, I highly suggest that you read it right now, because if you think you know things, you really don't know things until the very last chapter. And even then, you're still trying to put the pieces together. So I'm warning you now. It's a lot, so go read it first, even if you think you know enough to watch this video, because you really don't. And I'm just warning you now. This is your spoiler warning. If you ignore this spoiler warning and you go on with this video, that is 100% your fault. You've been forewarned. Okay, now we can dive into the material. So, the first bit of Christian imagery that I noticed was the cross that I've already spoken about earlier in this video. At the beginning of Pandora Hearts, there is a grave with a cross on it, and you don't know until the very end of the story whose grave it is, and even then, it can be up until interpretation. A cross is one of the most popular symbols of Christian imagery, as it is the thing that Jesus died on, and it's supposed to be a symbol of a love for the world. That's why in a lot of Christian homes there are crosses on walls, because it's a very big Christian symbol. And I feel it's important to know that the very beginning of Pandora Hearts had that cross, and also the very last image that you see is that grave with the cross on it. The next bit of Christian imagery I didn't realize until I watched the anime, and that is this line that says, "Let us bless this lamb that has come into the abyss." Now, a lot of this imagery that I'm going to be talking about, it relates to the fact that the abyss can be seen as both heaven and hell, which is very interesting because they actually kind of do talk about it with the beautiful light and then the darkness. And dark and light are already images in pretty much a lot of things. Even Shakespeare talks about dark and light imagery. And I feel it's important to know that the abyss can be seen as either, because at the beginning of Pandora Hearts, it's seen a lot more as hell, but at the end of Pandora Hearts, it's seen a lot more as heaven. And I feel it's very important. So this line that I'm talking about, "Let us bless this lamb that will come into the abyss," Jesus Christ is known as the lamb in Christian tale, like as the Christian religion. And he is actually in the Apostles' Creed, they talk about how he descended into hell and then ascended into heaven on the third day. And I feel it's interesting that Oz descended into the abyss and he was called the Lamb, and then basically ascended back onto Earth, and then he went back to the abyss when the light came and when he gave us light. So it's kind of this whole thing of he descended, then came back, and then went up. And in this way, Oz is kind of seen as a Jesus-like figure in Pandora Hearts. Now, you could probably disagree with me on this in multiple levels. Oz certainly has his flaws, but even in works such as The Old Man and the Sea by John Steinbeck, there is Christian imagery with Santiago being a Christ-like figure because of certain things that happen in the book. None of this is saying that Pandora Hearts is strictly Christian. It's just a matter of looking at it through a different lens. That's sort of an interesting one, in my opinion. The next bit of Christian imagery I'd like to talk about is the children of misfortune. As you know, Lacey was a child of misfortune, and Lacey had red eyes and black hair. Now, these types of things are seen very much as concurrent to the devil. The devil is supposed to be kind of, red eyes and possibly like a black and mysterious figure. So it makes sense that children of misfortune have red eyes and that Lacey in particular has black hair. Now, there are other children of misfortune, such as Xerx, who also has red eyes, and also such as Vincent, who is heterochromic and has one red eye. Neither of these two have black hair, but the red eyes are reminiscent of the devil, which is, very interesting, seeing as we're following this Christian imagery path. Another bit of Christian imagery that relates to Xerx is that at one point he is put up like this and is hanging on a wall. Jesus Christ died on a cross and was laid out like this, so it makes sense that Xerx was also put in this position on the wall. Another interesting bit is that Elliot, who has a chain called Humpty Dumpty, beheads people. In Christian imagery, there is a man named John the Baptist, and John the Baptist was beheaded for his crimes against humanity. And I think it's interesting that Elliot's chain was going around and beheading people, and then also beheaded him for his own sins against humanity. A lot of the things in this book actually have to deal with sin. Remember, at the very, very beginning, the very first line is, Os Vesalius, I now pass the chain of judgment upon you. Your sin is your very existence. A lot of these stories and these books, because there are multiple in the series, talk about sins. The children of misfortune, their sin is also that they exist and that they are children of misfortune. Oz's sin is his very existence. So there is a lot of things about sin. And remember what I was saying about the light and dark motif of the abyss and also the real world. Lacey saw light, which is very much like heaven, after she was thrown into the abyss. But also, she saw the darkness, and she saw the world as some darkness and prevailed in sin. And I think it's very interesting that the end of Pandora Hearts, with that brilliant light, that Jack finally comes to realize that there is something greater that he didn't realize before, and that's the light, and that's very reminiscent of heaven. And that the darkness that Lacey actually saw was the real world, and how it was configured as dark, which is usually associated with sin. And since we already know that characters were called out on their sins, this makes sense that the world that they're talking about is clouded by sin, and that the abyss is actually heaven when it is not corrupted. Another interesting thing about Elliot is he says, I reject you, to Humpty Dumpty. Very similar to how Jesus said to the devil how he rejected him and he would never lay down anything for the devil. He would never bow to the devil. And I just think that's interesting that it's related to his sin and then the beheading, and it's all kind of interconnected. Also, in one of the saddest deaths in Pandora Hearts, you have Xerx By the way, I've been saying it like that because that is his nickname, and that's how I've usually pronounced it as I've gone. But anyway, Xerxes watches his friends walk away right as he's about to tell them that he's going to die. This is very similar to in the Bible when Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane and he is going to die, and he tells his disciples he's going to die, and his disciples just fall asleep, and then they walk away from him, and even Peter actually betrays him. They kind of just run away in fear. This is similar to when Xerxes dies and he just kind of falls over, and Oz and the crew have to walk away from him and say goodbye even before he dies, which is really sad because the next time they see him, he's dead. There is also a heartbreaking quote from Xerxes where he says, "I wish the light of hope to shine upon them, just as the sun did all those days ago." And I feel like that is also very important to the character and to this imagery. There is also the interesting contradiction of Dulde, as she is pretty much Xerxes' complete opposite when she tempts him to do things and also is tempted to hurt other people, whereas Xerxes single-handedly always gives up everything for his friends and is very self-sacrificial. There is also an interesting quote from Sharon, who, as she's talking about Oz, says that there will be a fallen angel that will save them and who could bring ruin to them all, and she's speaking about Oz. And fallen angels are, of course, a big part of the Christian religion, as Lucifer, aka the devil, was a fallen angel. And I just think it's interesting that she uses those exact words, fallen angel, to depict Oz. Also about Xerxes, his body is carried by a bunch of different people and they take turns carrying it after he dies. This is very similar to Simon of Cyrene, who helped Jesus carry his cross. Some other interesting things, these ones pertaining to Gil. Gil gets his hand pierced at one point, just like Jesus' hands were pierced on the cross, and also one of his arms is taken off, which there is this famous Bible passage that goes like, never let your right hand know what your left hand is doing, and if it does, to like burn it or cut it off or something like that. And so it's very interesting that that actually happens to Gil, and that one of his hands actually like disappears because he did something evil, which is exactly what that Bible passage is pertaining to. Another interesting thing is that Oz, when he was brought on trial before Leo, it reminds me very much of Jesus being brought to trial in front of Pilate. I mean, he was bound pretty much the exact same way, and almost the exact same confrontation happened, in which what they were saying to one another was just very similar, and it made just so much sense to see that happening. I also just wanted to talk about how there were two different Alices, and I know we were talking about light and dark motif before, but there's also that with the Alices, how one is kind of evil and one is good, and how they are separated by the abyss. And, you know, that kind of just makes sense that, you know, there's one in the evil place and one in the good place. And I feel like that kind of just represents humanity. It could probably represent a lot of different things, but I just found it very interesting that there are two Alices in two different places at a time. And even so, then Alice, the good one that is with Oz, disappears with him as a self-sacrificial act. Now, these are all of the examples that I have, but I'm sure there are tons more that could be brought to this situation. There's a lot of imagery in the Pandora Hearts series, and remember, this is just one lens that I'm looking through. It's not saying that Pandora Hearts is completely Christian and should be read that way. No, it's just saying, here are some interesting things that I found in the books and that I wanted to share because I thought they were interesting. A lot of people do it with a lot of different books, specifically Shakespeare. A lot of people look into that and all the different imagery in it. So it's not like this is just trying to put that label on it. It's more like just an analysis. So I hope you enjoyed this, specifically because how many people watched the Pandora Hearts non-spoiler review. And I hope it just is kind of interesting and eye-opening because I found it interesting. But anyway, I hope you all have a great day, and remember to look towards the light as it happens at the end of Pandora Hearts, and to always see goodness in the world, as Oz learned. So have a great day, everyone. Bye!